Good morning, everyone. Hey, welcome again to our Teams for Tuesday little get together. Everyone that's showing up, and if you're here live, of course. But if not, if you're on the replay, of course, we appreciate you taking a look at that as well. So today we're going to follow kind of our same format that we follow. We'll go through a quick intro, talk about what's new. We got a few question and answers we'll dive into around teams and collaboration and things like that. That's kind of our topic today. And then a quick outro, how to get in contact with us if you want to go further or talk any more in depth about any of these items here with Microsoft Teams. So our Teams for Tuesdays we try to schedule these every other Tuesday. We vary the topics that we're going to cover. We try to keep them focused on one kind of theme, like today, around collaboration. We also have a governance and security topic that we do, as well as voice and maybe extending Teams, and we're dabbling with intros into some other areas, like introducing you to other folks and how they use Teams, like our sales teams and so forth. So we do have a Q&A box here. This isn't if you are using Teams and you've done like normal Teams meetings, that's generally like video, audio, and chats are there. So this one is actually presented in what's called a Teams live meeting. So it's like a one-to-many type of format that we're doing here today, and the interaction is done through the Q&A box. So you should have a Q&A box that's available to you where you joined us, and you can drop additional questions in there if you'd like. And what will happen is I'll review that at the end before we close up, and I'll address them here. And if there's anything else to follow up on, we'll do that. All right, that's actually that address that I have in there. Okay, so a little bit about us. If you haven't been in talk with any of us before, you don't know that much, right? So we've been around for 20 years. We've been around more than 20 years now. I actually started in 1999, so quite a while. We do have our Microsoft competencies, so we're a gold partner on a variety of different things. The two big ones here for today around Office 365, Microsoft 365, is the cloud productivity and cloud platform gold partner status that we have. Now, I myself have been with eGroup actually about 8.5 years now, so I'm the director of the cloud and managed service teams here. I do have a technical background working in the Microsoft stack, both before the Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Azure, but also after that. So beyond these tools, we're pretty strong team on the Microsoft side, but also on the traditional data side. So if we're talking hybrid or any type of new storage technology, data center refreshes, and those type of things, we consider those both private and public cloud type of interactions. We handle all of that. So, if you have questions around that or how something interacts here with Microsoft 365 or other services like Microsoft Azure, we're happy to address those as well and answer any questions around there. We have a team full of smart guys that can actually do that for you. Okay, so jumping in, what's new in Teams? So the levels that usually what I cover is what's new between our events that we have. So every other week it comes up and Microsoft releases what's new in Teams. Now this is a little bit different. It's not what you may see if you go out and do blogs or look at Microsoft videos where they like to come in and say, hey, these are all the things on the roadmap. They're not here yet. We actually look at what's been released and what's hit the clients, and we look exactly through the the release notes that are in there, and then we cover what's released from there. So here we have a few that are actually very relevant to our topic today, right? Because they're all around our collaborations and content here, and using our tools that are available to us with Teams. So one up here, the share email to Teams, from Outlook. So Outlook as the mail client, you can actually now send emails directly to Teams with attachments. I'll show you a few screenshots of that. The Meet Now function, if you're not using Teams yet, this won't be a big wow for you. If you're already using Teams, you will know that you had a function before. You could just hit Meet Now. It was a quick meeting. Now you can customize some of that and get links to those meetings. It makes it a little bit more helpful. And Start Meeting from Outlook, again, may not seem like a big thing, but we'll touch on what that is here in a couple of slides. And then the Recap is actually a new function in Teams as well that they provide for meetings and services. So the first one is how to share to Microsoft Teams, right, from Outlook. So if you're running Teams and Outlook today, you should see this little icon up here where it says share to Teams. Now, this is actually another plugin for Outlook. It's automatically installed if you're running Microsoft Teams. So essentially it will handle that integration with Outlook for you. No actions for you to take. It comes along with one of the updates that comes to the Microsoft Teams client. This is available on the Windows desktop version of Outlook and the Mac OS desktop version of Outlook. It's not available if you're using the web-based version of Outlook, and currently not available if you're using iOS or the Android client, so desktop only. So when you're in a message, you will see this little button pop up. It's also over here on the additional options inside of a message. And when you pop this open, you're going to get this window over here that tells you want to share it to Microsoft Teams. You're going to pick who you want to share it with. It could be an individual person, or it could be a group or a channel, if you're familiar with what those are in Microsoft Teams. And you're going to actually say include attachments or don't include attachments, and that's going to add a separate upload of that attachment into Microsoft Teams. So you'll actually fill this out, select your channels. This will highlight that share button there. You can click that and it's going to share it out. And then it's going to drop into Microsoft Teams. So it's going to look like this. In this case, this is where it's shared out to this channel. It's got a little bit of a verbiage up here. So this was added. You do get to add some context in the message that you're sharing. And then you'll see it's kind of quarantined off with the email. It looks like that email actually embedded in the Microsoft Teams client. And then it shows you the attachments that are available here as well. So one thing to note here, again, if you're familiar with Microsoft Teams in this format, is these attachments get saved in the team as well. So it's actually under this little files tab, and you can further collaborate on it or however you want to interact if you're moving that interaction to Microsoft Teams from Outlook. So the next improvement that they added was the Meet Now function. So previously, if you went to your calendar, you would get this Meet Now button. You could click it and you would start a quick meeting. You would just spin up a meeting. You could invite whoever you want, but that was it. It was kind of a one click and done. You couldn't do anything else. Now you can customize the meeting name. You know, before it would have had your name in there. It said meeting with, like for me, meeting with Jesus, and that would have been it. So you can actually name the meetings to give it a bit of a context, and you can click get a link to share. This again is new, wasn't here previously. Now we get this link that we can share out. So we can have a quick meeting, and it makes it easy to send to external participants as well when we want somebody outside of the organization to join those meetings. And of course, the share via email, if I click it, it will, if I have Outlook installed, it's going to open Outlook or my default mail client, and it's going to have that link in the body of the message like a normal scheduled Teams meeting would have. And from here, click this meeting options. You can actually go directly into the meeting options here. Again, this wasn't necessarily here before. It wasn't easy to access, rather. And this will pop up if you want to change any of the default settings for your meeting. So this brings our instant meeting abilities really closer to what our scheduled meetings were for. So if we were put them on the calendar or in the channels, we have had all of these options as well. And now we have this also for the quick meeting. So it makes it convenient and it kind of unifies the experience. So one's not different from the other. Okay, so now we have one more in Outlook that is related to joining teams. So this is the ribbon or the menu bar from Microsoft Outlook, and we now have this Join Teams meeting button. So when you're in the calendar and you have a meeting, you hover over it. If there's a Teams meeting associated with that, Outlook will understand that, right? And it will know, and this will appear. If it's a non-Teams meeting, this won't be present. Now, previously, when you had these from Outlook, if you wanted to go, you would go into the body of the message, you would click the link, and then it would open up your web browser, and it would say, hey, how do you want to open your Microsoft Teams? Do you want to join from the browser, or do you want to open up the client? So if you have Teams installed, you hit the button open in the client, it's going to bring Teams up and then open it again. So there's a few clicks just to get into the meeting from Outlook. This cuts that down. If I say join Teams meeting here from Outlook now and I click it, it immediately starts the meeting experience in the Teams window. It does not open the browser any longer, so you don't have to have those multiple clicks. Now, if I still wanted that functionality, maybe I do want to join it from the browser for whatever reason, I could still do that, right? You open up the message, go to the body of the message, click on the link. That opens it as a hyperlink. So a couple of options there that were added. Again, pretty helpful. It saves a couple of clicks, and if you have a lot of meetings, that adds up over time, right? If you save 5 or 10 seconds, per meeting, and you have 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 meetings, if you're in sales, then that starts to add up in the time that you're saving just in your clicks across the board. So it's something small that actually can have a great benefit over time. Okay, and here is kind of a quick view of what this recap session looks like. So in Teams, when we have a meeting, we can record those meetings, and we can also apply transcripts if we've allowed it, as IT administrators have allowed it. You can transcribe for the meetings, automatic transcribings, and when the meeting is done, you will see in the details sections that we have some new items that pop up. Now this is just now rolling out, so everybody may not see all of this now, but once it hits you, you'll see it broken up like it is here on the screen. So you'll see the recording. You could click on that. That's going to play the recording of the meeting for you. You'll have a transcript of that meeting and any notes that were associated with the meeting. So if you're familiar like with Outlook and it's tie into OneNote, Teams has that same capability, and we can tie meeting notes into this. So you can have an agenda, take notes, all that stuff is active. That will be in there. And this one, which is a pretty big one, is the new attendance reports. So previously, this was a bit of a pain to get. You could only get it inside of an active meeting, and you would only get that attendance report based on who was in that meeting at the time that you grabbed it. So it wasn't going to give you a full historical view. So this will give you a better breakdown of who attended those meetings as well. Important thing to note is if you don't record a meeting or you don't enable transcripts, then of course these won't be on there. They won't be available for you. Now, other helpful things with this is, this is a single meeting instance, but if you have a reoccurring meeting, let's say you start a meeting in a channel and it's reoccurring, it's a weekly sales meeting, a weekly team meeting, you'll actually get these stacked. It's going to show you all of the recordings for your meetings if you're recording those, and it will show you in the list on the dates of when they're recorded and when the transcripts have taken place. So some things that we're looking forward into some of these, right, especially with the transcripts, is taking this and then maybe repurposing that internally. So a lot of these meetings, you might have an hour-long meeting, but who's going to go back and watch the recording? They may watch it, may speed it up. People just want to review highlights. You're going to be able to grab those transcripts, edit those up a bit, take the main bullet points, and then redistribute those with the teams like a follow-up. So I think that's always a good meeting follow-up deal there, and that should help with that. And of course, transcripts coupled with notes can bring it all together with context that's happening, and then you can always fall back to that recording if needed. So I think it's going to be a tremendously helpful feature, bringing it all to one interface. All right, so on to a few questions and answers that we had. So one question, these are two big broad questions that I'm going to address today, and there's smaller questions within these contexts, but one is like, how do you foster collaboration in Microsoft Teams? Well, it's not really that hard. It really depends on every organization and their culture, but Teams is really built around two main functions, and that's your collaboration and your communications, right? So the Teams client itself is going to help with fostering the collaboration inside of the tool. Part of this, though, is just gaining that momentum of where people are doing things, right? So when you start bringing things together and you start showing the benefits of sharing files and having those done in Teams versus sending over email, right? Getting one source of truth that everybody works on. The ability for multiple people to bring up an Excel sheet or a Word document and they can work on it and make edits together. You're not locked out of those files, for instance. Those are benefits you can convey out to your organizations when you're rolling these out and say, these are things you couldn't do before. When you're on a file share, if one person opened like a marketing doc, the other person that was helping that couldn't do anything with it. They were on their own copy and you had to merge those later, or just wait for someone to get out of it. So we are able to get around that with the co-editing space here on Microsoft Teams. It really makes working with people on these documents really, really easy. Viewing documents and accessibility for documents versus file shares, right? I mean, we have Microsoft Teams behind the scenes. We've got the OneDrive and SharePoint. This is where files are going. So now we can access those on our mobile devices or when we're away from the office. So we're not tied into one location actually working on these things. And we don't have those disparate copies going around. Tracking and reporting. I mean, that's both in those documents, but we can surface additional reports. Perhaps you want to share an Excel dashboard with pivot charts in there, or you're using more advanced reporting functionality like Power BI. We can bring all those together in a shared workspace, so we don't have to go to different places to get these things, right? Integrations with other services are there, so we can add other applications in there. Sometimes it's just like a web link that's going to go to another web-enabled type of asset that you're using, whether it's an external SaaS or it's an internal web tool, or you might have a custom developed app that you want to integrate with Teams. So Teams has that framework, so you can actually give like a native UI to any type of backend system as well. So it can be extended there. And that extension is very powerful as far as driving, the use cases. Again, if you think about this as a shared collaboration space, you want to bring the tools that you need together in that one area. So project management is a good use case there. Projects, we might give a team access to one context of the actual projects that's going on. So now we can keep our communication in there. We can keep our chats and our messaging. We can schedule meetings for that project within there, and we can have those recordings and those transcripts and things that are ongoing for that project all within the same workspace. We can use tools like Planner, which is a kind of a Kanban tool, or Trello, if you're familiar with that. If you have Microsoft Project that can be integrated, or another project tool, you might have that on there and have that project, assets tied to that team. You might use Excel for tracking risks and issues and bring it all together. It becomes a workspace, right? And when that's there, that's almost going to force collaboration, because that's where the assets are. So people have to come in to utilize it. Communications is another one. And to be honest, this is where most people actually start, right? Is you start with the chat functions and maybe the file sharing with individuals. And that sometimes takes a little bit of momentum to build up, depending on if you're moving from something or you don't have anything in place today. But the more people that you start to onboard into these tools, and this is where they're working, the more other people will eventually be brought in. So I will tell you, we had Skype before we went to Microsoft Teams. So our sales folks were happy with Skype. They had no issues with Skype. And so when we brought in Teams, they didn't see a lot of the benefit. So we let them stay on Skype for a little bit while we rolled out Teams for the rest of the company. So we got all of our IT folks and delivery folks that were on Teams. And eventually we got to a mass where it didn't make sense for them to be on Skype anymore, because if they wanted to interact with the internal teams or the IT teams, right, or delivery part of the projects, they were now using two tools. So it made it really easy for them to eventually collapse in and to utilize Teams, because now we were simplifying their workflow, because they had to go where we were. So you can use that strategy as well if you have those that are really ingrained on using one platform or another. Now, a more advanced workflow on that is if you want to integrate additional chat tools. There are third-party services, for instance, that will do translations between a Teams chat and, say, a Slack board, or the Cisco WebEx type of platforms. And so you can move messages between all three while you're doing there. That's certainly a more advanced scenario. And if you're doing a migration or plan to move away from it, probably not one I recommend. But if you know they're going to stay around long term, you just know this one department is always going to use this other tool, but everybody else is maybe going to use Teams, that might make sense then to look at a tool like that can integrate them, at least from a chat communication standpoint. Voice and video is another thing that's in there. I mean, that's out of the box. You've got the VoIP access, right? So I can just ping somebody on my team. If they're up, they're online, I can hit maybe a quick IM. Hey, are you available for a quick call? Yes, I am. Hit the button. I'm talking to them real time, and we're solving a problem. Avoiding the 12 back and forth emails, for instance. We might just jump on there. Video can be important for engagement. I think most people have learned, over the pandemic, everybody working remote. Video can be important with engaging with your teammates, kind of keeping that connection going, and making it maybe a less. I think what's the Zoom fatigue is real, of course, but it still helps to have that video interaction. So when you're seeing things, you're seeing the other person and engaging there. Meetings, we talked about, like, all of the new things that are coming with meetings that are available to you. Of course, with meetings, we get the chats, we get the voice, we get the videos, and it helps us kind of bridge that gap again with that person-to-person type of interactions, especially if we're all using video. And if you need to extend it out, there are native communications that will tie in your team's capabilities into actual traditional phone services. So while chatting internally, right, IP to IP kind of thing, right, colleague to colleague, that works fine. It's great. But let's say I want to talk to somebody externally. If I'm on the sales team, I might need to reach out and call my customer, but they're not on Teams. They have a regular phone number. I can have a phone number in Teams. I can integrate that, get it into the traditional PSTN networks, normal telephone networks, so that I can make those calls directly from there. It also lets me separate maybe a work number from a personal number and keep it on the same phone. So I can have my Teams number that maybe I use for work and sales, and that's where everything's going to come in. But then I have my personal number on my cell phone that's a little bit separate. Now, they both go to my cell phone if I'm running it on my cell phone, but I can do some different things there in terms of sharing documents at that point, integrating other flows with customers and so forth. So those are just built into Teams, right? And those are out of the box. I don't have to do too much to get these functions up and running and get them out to people. So that being said, really when you go to roll this out, you just want to start, and everybody's depth of what they get into this process is going to be different. But I think for the folks that were asking this question, of course, the first place is to actually start. What's the initial planning look like? Who's on the team that's going to roll it out? And how should we demonstrate Teams use, right? So to go in that a bit more is I might have the team that's going to be responsible for rollout. Usually this will be, IT, and we're gonna plan that rollout that's going out based on what are our requirements. Now, I don't recommend looking at the tool, looking at all the technical controls for your security governance, and then trying to build your policies around that. Instead, use the policies that you have, and then look how the tool brings those controls to meet those policy requirements, right? So if I already know that we don't allow external access, we don't allow somebody to just go out, invite somebody into our collaboration group outside of the company and share documents with them, then we know we need to lock that down on Teams, right? So what we don't want to do is just start over there and go through the technical controls and then kind of backport that. Start with what the business needs are first, and then fill those controls in there. And how deep you go into that is going to depend on your own organization, your own requirements, and the type of things that you allow or don't allow there. And the other thing is the initial use case. And again, if we're starting with IT, it usually makes sense for IT to start up with a couple of teams and channels to start working on it themselves, maybe manage smaller projects within there, have a group for that, for the collaboration, for the assets that are coming in around that, some initial internal training like between the teams and individuals where you start collecting some of those things internally. And once you're kind of comfortable with there, how do I support teams in this manner? Everybody's got exposure at it. Start bringing in and identifying like your early adopters, who outside of IT can be brought in, who's going to make the best use of this, what scenarios can we actually start putting in place? Do we have a project team that they're going to be able to take this and we can start building projects around it and start introducing other people into that via the projects? Perhaps it's just a smaller group. Maybe I just have a smaller HR team, 2 or 3 people, and I'm going to create them a space and get them to work with their documents in there. So when they're writing, policies and standards and so forth, we'll show them how they can co-edit documents in that space and keep track of things. And then use that for getting your support and training in place. There's a ton of ready-made material that Microsoft already has. So they've got assets out there for emailing and putting up posters and so forth, and recorded sessions that you can utilize. But you can also do your own recorded demos, or have some third party come in and they can also facilitate that. And that could be more extended admin training, but it could also be the user training that gets started there, and like train the trainer type of things, and they start getting the word out. And the last one here, gather feedback. That's important. So as you get these early seedings of the tool, start getting feedback, start finding out like, okay, we've showed this to you, you've got these folks that are using it in their jobs, but what is it not doing, or what could we do to close the gap in some areas? Maybe it's allowing integration with another tool, maybe it's expanding the training outside of Teams to some of the other Microsoft tools that are available to them, and how they can use that with Teams, and how does that fix a problem that they're currently having with the tool. And I say mix that up a little bit with actually looking what's going on. If you can get out in there and watch people work on it, notice like when they're in Teams, when are they moving out of Teams? What are they moving out to do? And is there something we can plug in that gap to bring them back into Teams? Are they using a separate tool that actually has the same capability in Teams that we probably should look at to see if it provides a better experience, because they never have to leave the tool to going out there. So a lot can happen within this loop, and again, organizational specific, but the more you're engaged with the people that are using it, kind of the better feedback you're going to get from that loop. And of course, you feed that all back into the wider adoption. And some of this is planned versus organic. What I mean by that is, if we do an early adopter phase, like I said, with projects, for instance, well, your project managers might run that, collect your assets. We might have project team members that are brought in. While they may not be our traditional early adopters in this phase, they are going to be early adopters that we're kind of forcing into the platform, because this is where we're putting our materials. And they organically will also help get the word out. They're like, hey, we can do all this. I like this. How do we start moving these tools and so forth? But then, kind of at the same time that you have your wider adoption plan, you get your communication out. This is the tool. This is the timeline. This is when you're going to have this. These are scenarios that are working today that we already have out there. Setting up your teams. So going out and just saying, hey, come to our lunch session. We're going to do a recording on this, or I'm going to have an Ask Me Anything over this period, and just making it available to users to drop in as they need it, right? I think you can have it there and just answer questions, collect them, add them back into your FAQs, open up for wide adoption uses of the other scenarios. So you may not have thought everything here, but as people are seeing it, they're going to come up with other ideas. Be open to what they want to use the tool for, and it's just an iterative process after that, right? Just continue refining it, and like anything else, the more you put in on it, the more focus there is on the tool, the more the tool itself is going to be used. Okay, so this one did come in about best practices. So I'm not a big fan of the term best practices, because not everything that is a best practice for one organization transfers to another. So really, it's about understanding your organization, your users, how can they take advantage of the tool, and what's best for them, right? And one example I like to give is we know, for instance, enabling multi-factor authentication and making sure that your operating systems and softwares are patched are best practice, right? And IT, that's like it, because that's going to protect you from over like 99% of malicious activity out there. But that's not always a good practice. And the reason I say that is because if you work in manufacturing, and if I go out to a shop floor, we can't have that every time somebody logs into a machine, every time they're accessing something. If a machine operator needs to pull an order or pull a checklist, they have to be able to walk up to a shared machine, grab it, pull it out, get to work. You can't add that friction in there. So in this case, what's normally considered a best practice is not a best practice. It doesn't transfer there, right? So you have to look at the individual use cases on where they should be applied. And from a risk and governance standpoint, like that specific example I had, you have to weigh those risks as well, and then come up to what the organization is comfortable with deploying there. And the first big one that comes out here, and I'll just address this one here, is like, well, how do I lock down teams, or should I lock down teams or leave it open? Out of the box, you turn it on. There's many different ways you can actually create a team through different tools, and anybody can do it. And a lot of people worry about sprawl or data access, which are legitimate, right? So, but it's not, again, there's not a best practice for locking that down. Some organizations don't have, say, a lot of material that, if shared out externally, is going to damage the company, right? It's low value. It's internal still. It's still internal for use, but they don't have to add all the hoops and extra controls to make a user jump through it to be able to share that, because they're not worried about exposure. For in that case, we'll just leave it open, let people use it. They can share with who they want. They know how they're going to work. We see this a lot more in smaller teams, or if you're in a regulated industry, you could be the opposite of that, right? You have to worry about it. I have intellectual property that I must protect. So now I have to go in and make sure I put the controls in place so those are in place. So I will restrict access. You can no longer share with guests, what's called guest users, right? So external users that will participate in our groups and our sharing with our documents. We're going to turn that off, or give you a specific place where you can do that. You might have to layer in actual controls on your IP, or limit what IP is even shared or saved in the cloud, depending on your actual needs. So, another example then is you just have to be in tune with what your organization needs as far as that goes. And that's usually where we start. We run different sessions here, and I'll pull up. This is the outro, how to contact us. We've got our email there, our number. If you're engaged with any of our account executives, of course, reach out to them directly, and they can always get you answers. But if we need to do like envisioning sessions or road mapping sessions on how to roll it out or how to use Teams, like we can do that. We can help with the contextualizing use cases. So if we need to go in and work with a specific team, whether it's HR, finance, or so forth, we can help gather that information and say, hey, this is what we think you should roll out for Teams. There could be integration opportunities as well. So while Teams itself has a few that are built in, most of this comes by layering in additional tools, like the low-code tools from the Power Platform suite, which are included in a lot of Microsoft 365 SKUs already. But they allow you to do things like create custom forms, custom interactions, and custom workflows that tie to other things. And those are low code because you don't have to break out like C# and Ruby and programming languages per se, but they do have a programming language in there. It's much like Excel. If you've done Excel functions, you would be very familiar with how the formatting of those tools are in terms of how they automate things. All right, guys. Well, we're right at time. I'm checking our Q&A bucket, so I don't have any open questions here. But if you do have questions, really around Teams, whether it's a functionality, use case, a technical question, feel free to let us know. We're happy to educate you on that. If you're interested in knowing more about what the envisioning sessions, road mapping sessions look like, again, reach out. We're happy to have that conversation with you. So I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their Tuesday and they have a great week. And we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you.